It was a Friday afternoon at Denver International Airport, Terminal C, Gate 47, when Maya Chen boarded United Airlines Flight 2847 bound for Seattle. The departure time showed 3:15 p.m. on the boarding pass clutched in her 13-year-old hand, and the gate agent smiled that practiced airline smile as she scanned the ticket and waved the young teenager through. Maya adjusted her worn backpack on her shoulders, the same faded blue one she'd carried to school for 2 years now, and made her way down the jetway, her sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished floor. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The flight attendant at the aircraft door bent down slightly, that automatic gesture adults make when addressing children they assume need extra attention. Traveling alone today, sweetie? Her name tag read Jennifer, and her voice carried that bright, encouraging tone people use with kids they think might be nervous about flying solo. Yes, ma'am, Maya said quietly, handing over her unaccompanied minor paperwork even though at 13 she was technically old enough to fly without that designation. Her aunt had insisted on it anyway, probably because Maya looked younger than her age, small for 13, with dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail and oversized glasses that kept sliding down her nose. Well, you just let us know if you need anything at all, okay? You've got seat 14F, that's a window seat on the right side. Perfect for watching the clouds. Jennifer's enthusiasm felt forced but kind, and Maya nodded politely before making her way down the aisle. Other passengers barely glanced at her as she passed, just another kid traveling to visit relatives probably, maybe heading to some summer camp or youth program. An older woman in 12F smiled warmly and offered Maya a granola bar from her purse. Long flight ahead, honey. You have snacks. The assumption was clear in her voice, kids need looking after, especially traveling kids who might not have packed properly. Maya settled into her window seat and pulled out her tablet, connecting her headphones with practiced ease. To anyone watching, she was doing exactly what any teenager would do, probably queuing up Netflix shows or scrolling through social media, killing time before takeoff the way kids do. The businessman in 14E glanced over and chuckled softly, probably assuming she was absorbed in TikTok videos or texting friends with emoji-filled messages about how boring flying was. But the tablet screen told a different story, if anyone had bothered to look closely. The document open wasn't a streaming app or social media, it was a dense technical manual with diagrams of aircraft systems, hydraulic configurations, and emergency procedure flowcharts that would make most aviation engineers squint in concentration. Maya's eyes moved across the screen with intense focus, her finger occasionally tracing along a schematic diagram as she memorized sequences she'd reviewed hundreds of times before. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. The flight attendant came by during taxi, bending down again with that same bright smile. Can I get you something to drink once we're in the air? We have apple juice, Sprite, ginger ale. The drink options presented like she was ordering off a kid's menu, simple choices for a simple kid. Water's fine, thank you, Maya said, barely looking up from her tablet. Jennifer patted her shoulder gently. You got it, sweetheart. And you just press that call button if you need anything, okay? Don't be shy. She moved on, probably making a mental note to check on the unaccompanied minor every 20 minutes, the way training demanded. Flight 2847 pushed back from the gate at 3:22 p.m., 7 minutes late but nothing unusual for a Friday afternoon departure. The Boeing 737 rumbled down the runway and lifted smoothly into Colorado's brilliant blue sky, banking west toward Seattle. Maya kept her eyes on the tablet, occasionally glancing out the window at the Rocky Mountains falling away beneath them, their snow-covered peaks gleaming in the afternoon sun. What nobody on that flight knew, what the kind flight attendant and the granola bar lady and the businessman checking his email couldn't possibly know, was that the name saved at the top of Maya's technical documents read Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, Tactical Flight Operations, Classified. What they didn't know was that Sarah Chen had been one of the most brilliant tactical aviators the United States Air Force had ever produced, a pilot whose innovations in F-22 Raptor operations had pushed the boundaries of what the world's most advanced stealth fighter could accomplish. What they definitely didn't know was that Sarah Chen had died 3 years ago during a classified test flight, leaving behind a 13-year-old daughter and a legacy that weighed heavier than any teenager should have to carry. And they certainly didn't know that before she died, Sarah Chen's call sign had been Falcon 1, a designation that represented not just a name but a standard of excellence that Air Force pilots spoke about in reverent whispers. They didn't know that after her death, in a private ceremony attended by generals and decorated pilots, Maya's family had made the unprecedented decision to transfer that call sign to Sarah's daughter, hoping that one day she might honor the legacy her mother had built. Maya had spent the last 3 years doing exactly that. While other kids her age worried about grades and crushes and fitting in at school, Maya had buried herself in her mother's work. The Air Force had granted her access to Sarah's personal flight notes, training materials, and research documents, partly out of respect for a fallen warrior, partly as grief therapy, partly because nobody really thought a kid would understand the advanced tactical aviation concepts contained in those classified files anyway. They'd been wrong about that. Maya had absorbed everything. Every technical detail about F-22 systems architecture, every emergency procedure her mother had documented, every unconventional maneuver that Sarah had pioneered during test operations. She'd studied flight control hydraulics and engine management systems and tactical combat scenarios with the intensity that only grief could fuel. Her mother was gone, but her mother's knowledge remained, and Maya had made it her mission to master every single thing Sarah Chen had known about flying the most sophisticated fighter jet ever built. The tablet in her lap contained copies of her mother's final research project, a series of emergency recovery procedures for catastrophic F-22 systems failures that the Air Force had deemed too dangerous and unconventional to validate for standard operations. Sarah had been developing these procedures during test flights, pushing the Raptor beyond its normal operational envelope to understand what was possible in impossible situations. The Air Force had classified the research but never officially adopted it, considering Sarah's approaches too radical, too risky, too far outside established doctrine. Sarah Chen had died proving those procedures worked, in a test flight gone wrong that Maya still didn't have full details about. The official letter had said, systems failure during classified operations, which was military speak for, we can't tell you what your mother was doing when she died, but she died doing it courageously. The unofficial whispers Maya had overheard at the memorial service suggested her mother had been testing emergency recovery sequences that other pilots considered impossible, that she'd pushed the F-22 to failure points deliberately to understand how to survive them. Maya touched the screen of her tablet gently, her finger resting on a diagram her mother had hand-drawn showing hydraulic rerouting sequences during flight control degradation. Sarah's handwriting was in the margins. Conventional wisdom says this can't work, but conventional wisdom hasn't tested these configurations under combat pressure. Theory suggests we can maintain control authority through secondary pathways if we accept temporary stability reduction. Nobody wants to accept that trade-off, but in real emergency scenarios, temporary instability beats certain death. Nobody wants to accept that trade-off. Maya had read those words 1,000 times, understanding that her mother had died proving that accepting unconventional risks could save lives, that sometimes the safe approach killed people and the dangerous approach saved them. The Air Force hadn't wanted to hear it then. They'd filed Sarah's research away, honored her memory, given her daughter access to the materials as a courtesy, and moved on. Flight 2847 reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet somewhere over Utah, the seatbelt sign chiming off as the pilots announced smooth sailing ahead. Jennifer came by with Maya's water, setting it on the tray table with a napkin and another warm smile. "Doing okay, hon? That's quite the serious reading you've got there." She'd glanced at the tablet screen but clearly hadn't registered what she was seeing, just technical diagrams that looked impressively complicated, probably some school project or educational game that smart kids played these days. "I'm fine, thank you," Maya said, accepting the water with a polite smile that had become automatic over the years. Adults were always kind to her, always concerned about her, always completely oblivious to who she actually was and what she carried inside her head. The businessman in 14E had dozed off, his tablet playing some action movie with the sound off. The granola bar lady across the aisle was reading a romance novel, completely absorbed. The young couple in the row ahead were taking selfies, laughing quietly as they scrolled through photos. Normal people doing normal things on a normal Friday afternoon flight. Maya went back to her technical manuals, reviewing emergency hydraulic rerouting procedures for what felt like the 1000th time. She knew these sequences by heart, could probably recite them in her sleep at this point, but she kept reviewing anyway because that's what her mother would have done. Sarah Chen had been famous in the Air Force for her meticulous preparation, for reviewing procedures until they became instinct, for making sure knowledge lived in muscle memory rather than just conscious thought. If you ever need this knowledge in a real emergency, Sarah had written in one of her training notes that Maya had found, you won't have time to think through the steps consciously. You need to have practiced it so many times that your hands move before your brain finishes processing the situation. That's the difference between alive and dead, the gap between thinking and doing. Maya wondered sometimes if her mother had known, in those final moments of that test flight, whether the procedures she developed would actually work. Had there been time to be scared? Had Sarah thought about her daughter? Had she? Oh my God, look at that. The woman across the aisle was suddenly pressed against her window, pointing outside with obvious alarm. Her voice carried that edge of confusion and fear that makes other passengers instinctively look up from their phones and books and movies. Maya turned to her own window and felt her breath catch in her throat. Outside, maybe 1,000 feet away and slightly below their altitude, was an F-22 Raptor. Maya recognized it instantly, the distinctive angular profile, the swept wings, the twin engines that made it the most powerful fighter jet in the American arsenal. But something was catastrophically wrong. Black smoke trailed from the port engine, visible even against the bright afternoon sky. The fighter's flight pattern was erratic, wings rocking side to side in ways that no F-22 pilot would ever execute intentionally. As Maya watched, the Raptor suddenly dropped altitude in a barely controlled descent before the pilot managed to arrest the fall, leveling off but continuing to trail smoke. "Is that a military jet?" someone behind Maya asked, voice tight with concern. "Why is it smoking like that?" another passenger said. "Should we be worried? Is it going to hit us?" The cabin was suddenly electric with nervous energy, passengers pressing against windows on the right side of the aircraft, phones coming out to record video even though everyone knew you weren't supposed to use phones during flight. Jennifer and the other flight attendants were trying to maintain calm, moving through the cabin with reassuring voices, but Maya could see the concern in their eyes. You didn't see smoking military fighters during routine commercial flights. This was wrong, dangerously wrong, and everyone on board knew it even if they didn't understand the specifics. Maya's hands had gone cold. Her mind was already cataloging what she was seeing, the pattern of smoke suggesting engine failure, the flight control issues visible in the erratic movements, the steady altitude loss that the pilot was fighting to control. This wasn't a training exercise or a flyby gone wrong. This was a pilot in serious trouble, fighting to keep an aircraft under control against failures that were escalating by the second. The intercom crackled to life, and the captain's voice came through with forced calm. "Folks, this is Captain Rodriguez from the flight deck. You may have noticed a military aircraft nearby. We've established radio contact with Air Force emergency frequencies, and they've asked us to maintain our current course and altitude while they coordinate rescue operations. The fighter pilot is experiencing technical difficulties but is in contact with ground control. We're in no danger, but I'm going to ask everyone to remain seated with seatbelts fastened as a precaution." Technical difficulties. Maya almost laughed at the euphemism. That F-22 wasn't having technical difficulties, it was dying in mid-air, and the pilot was running out of options fast. She pressed her face against the window, watching the Raptor struggle. The smoke had intensified, and now she could see what looked like fluid trailing from the aircraft, hydraulic fluid maybe, which would explain the control issues. The fighter dropped another 100 feet in an uncontrolled descent before recovering, and Maya's trained eye recognized what she was seeing, a pilot with degrading flight controls, fighting a battle against physics and engineering that was rapidly being lost. The cabin speakers crackled again, but this time it wasn't the captain's voice. It was military radio communications, patched through so passengers could hear what was happening. catastrophic systems failure, ejection seat malfunction, cannot bail out, repeat, cannot bail out. The pilot's voice was professional but strained, the kind of forced calm that comes from knowing you're probably about to die and trying to at least die professionally. Maya's heart was hammering. Ejection seat malfunction meant the pilot was trapped in the aircraft, unable to use the normal emergency escape that would blow the canopy and rocket him clear of a dying fighter. Without ejection capability, the pilot had to either regain control of the crippled Raptor or ride it all the way to impact. More radio chatter flooded the cabin. Falcon 77, this is Cobra Base, we're scrambling additional aircraft to your position, hold together, we're working the problem. Cobra Base, flight controls are degrading rapidly, I've got hydraulic failures cascading, trying emergency rerouting but nothing's responding according to procedure. Copy, 77, we're pulling every tactical expert we have, stay with it. Maya knew what she was hearing. She'd read about this exact scenario in her mother's notes. The specific pattern of failures, engine problems combined with hydraulic cascade failure combined with ejection system malfunction, this was the nightmare scenario that Sarah Chen had researched extensively, the impossible combination of failures that conventional Air Force doctrine said was unsurvivable. Her mother had believed it was survivable. Had died testing procedures that might prove it. And now Maya was watching a pilot trapped in exactly that scenario, listening to Air Force tactical experts admit they didn't know how to save him, watching a warrior face certain death because the one person who'd figured out how to survive this particular crisis was dead and her research had been filed away as too unconventional to teach. Except the research wasn't filed away. It was on a tablet in seat 14F, memorized by a 13-year-old girl who'd spent 3 years obsessively studying her mother's work. Maya's hands were shaking. She was just a kid. She was 13 years old, sitting on a commercial flight, wearing a faded hoodie and sneakers that needed replacing. She had homework in her backpack and a permission slip for a school field trip that she kept forgetting to have her aunt sign. She was nobody important, just a kid that flight attendants checked on and passengers offered snacks to because kids needed looking after. But she was also Falcon 1. The radio chatter continued, increasingly desperate, tried every recovery sequence we know, nothing's working, this is going beyond established parameters. 77, be advised we're considering emergency landing scenarios, can you maintain altitude long enough to reach Peterson Air Force Base? Negative, Cobra Base, I'm losing control authority too fast, hydraulics are at 12% and falling, I don't think I can. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt. Jennifer appeared immediately, that concerned flight attendant instinct kicking in. Honey, you need to stay seated right now, we're in an emergency situation. I know, Maya said quietly. I need to talk to the captain. Right now. It's about the F-22. Jennifer's expression shifted to something between sympathy and frustration, probably thinking this was a kid excited about military aircraft at exactly the wrong time. Sweetheart, the pilots are very busy right now, we can't. Tell them a passenger needs to speak with Air Force Command, Maya interrupted, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Tell them I have information about recovery procedures for this specific failure pattern. Tell them, she paused, taking a breath, knowing what she was about to reveal and what it would mean. Tell them Falcon 1 needs to talk to Cobra Base immediately. Jennifer blinked. Honey, I don't know what you. The F-22 pilot is trapped in an aircraft with cascading hydraulic failures and a malfunctioning ejection seat, Maya said, her voice shifting from polite teenager to something else entirely, something that made Jennifer freeze mid-response. He's tried standard recovery procedures and they're not working because this isn't a standard failure pattern. I know unconventional procedures that might save his life, but I need to talk to Air Force Command right now or that pilot dies. My call sign is Falcon 1. Check with the captain. Check with Air Force records. But do it fast because that pilot has maybe 3 minutes before complete control loss. The technical terminology, the calm authority, the specific knowledge about the F-22 situation, Jennifer's expression transformed from dismissive concern to shock. She stared at Maya for a long moment, clearly trying to reconcile the 13-year-old girl in front of her with the expertise that had just come out of that girl's mouth. "Stay here," Jennifer said finally, and practically ran toward the cockpit. The businessman in 14E was awake now, staring at Maya with undisguised confusion. The granola bar lady had heard the entire exchange and was looking at Maya like she'd suddenly grown a second head. Other passengers nearby were whispering, clearly having overheard but not understanding what was happening. Maya ignored them all, her eyes back on the window where the F-22 continued its death spiral. She could see the pilot still fighting, still trying every procedure he knew, but the Raptor was losing altitude steadily now, the control problems getting worse by the second. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, words from a video recording Sarah had made during her test flight preparation. "If these procedures ever need to be used in a real emergency, whoever's using them needs to trust the aircraft beyond what their training tells them is safe. You're deliberately accepting instability to maintain control authority through secondary systems. It feels wrong. Every instinct screams that you're making things worse. But the alternative is complete control loss, and this gives you a chance. Sometimes survival means embracing controlled danger instead of uncontrolled death." The cockpit door opened, and Captain Rodriguez emerged looking stressed and bewildered. He walked quickly to Maya's row, Jennifer trailing behind him. He crouched in the aisle, his eyes scanning Maya's face like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. "You said Falcon 1. His voice was quiet but intense. "Yes, sir. That's a military call sign. That belonged to, he stopped, clearly not wanting to say, a dead pilot, to a kid. "My mother," Maya said simply. "Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen. She died 3 years ago during test flight operations. The call sign was transferred to me by my family. Check Air Force records, it's legitimate." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "You're 13 years old." "Yes, sir." "How do you know about F-22 emergency procedures?" "My mother's research. She spent years developing unconventional recovery procedures for catastrophic failure scenarios. The Air Force granted me access to her classified materials after she died. I've studied them extensively. What's happening to that pilot right now? I've read the exact recovery procedures my mother developed for this specific situation. The Air Force has tactical experts working this problem right now. Experienced pilots, engineers. Who are failing," Maya said bluntly. "I've been listening to the radio traffic. They're trying standard procedures that don't work for this failure pattern. My mother's procedures weren't standard. That's why the Air Force never officially adopted them. But she proved they work, and I know them." Rodriguez looked at Jennifer, then back at Maya. The calculation was obvious in his eyes. This was insane, trusting a teenager with tactical knowledge that Air Force experts supposedly had covered. But the alternative was watching a pilot die while they did nothing. "You understand if you're wrong about this." "If I'm wrong, that pilot dies," Maya said. "If nobody tries, that pilot dies. At least my way gives him a chance." Rodriguez made his decision. "Come with me." Maya followed him to the cockpit, acutely aware of every passenger watching her walk down the aisle, this kid in jeans and a hoodie heading to the flight deck during a military emergency. The whispers followed her. "Who is that girl? What's happening? Did she say Falcon 1? The cockpit was cramped and loud with overlapping radio communications. The co-pilot, whose name tag read Hamilton, glanced back with surprise as Maya entered. Rodriguez slid into his seat and keyed the radio. "Cobra Base, this is United Flight 2847, we have a passenger requesting urgent communication with you regarding Falcon 77's emergency." The response came immediately, a different voice now, deeper and carrying the weight of command authority. "United 2847, this is General Marcus at Cobra Base Tactical Operations. We don't have time for civilian speculation right now." "General," the passenger identifies herself as Falcon 1, Rodriguez interrupted. The radio went silent. For 3 full seconds, there was nothing but static. Maya could imagine the scene at Cobra Base, controllers freezing, officers turning to stare at radios, someone frantically pulling up Air Force records to verify what they just heard. When the general's voice came back, it was tight and controlled. Say again, United 2847. Who is on your aircraft? Rodriguez handed the headset to Maya. She took it with hands that were steadier than she felt, settled the headphones over her ears, and pressed the transmit button. Cobra Base, this is Falcon 1. My actual name is Maya Chen. I'm the daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, who held the Falcon 1 designation until her death 3 years ago. The call sign was officially transferred to me by my family. Check your records, it should all be there. Another pause, shorter this time. She could hear muffled voices in the background, someone shouting something about pulling files, confirmation codes being read out. Maya Chen, the general said slowly. We have your records here. This is unprecedented. You're 13 years old. Yes, sir. Why are you on this radio frequency during a military emergency? Maya took a breath. This was it, the moment where she either convinced them or got dismissed as a kid playing pretend. Because I've been listening to Falcon 77's situation, and I recognize the failure pattern. It matches research my mother conducted before she died, specific procedures for recovering from cascading hydraulic failures combined with ejection system malfunction. The Air Force classified her research but never officially adopted her procedures. I have access to all her materials. I've studied them extensively. What your tactical experts are trying right now isn't going to work because this scenario exceeds standard doctrine parameters. My mother developed unconventional procedures specifically for this situation, and I can walk your pilot through them. With all respect to your mother's memory, the general said carefully, we have some of the most experienced F-22 pilots in the world working this problem. They've flown combat missions, test operations. And they're failing, Maya interrupted. I don't mean disrespect, sir, but I've been listening. Your experts are trying by-the-book procedures that assume normal failure cascades. This isn't normal. The specific combination of engine failure plus hydraulic cascade plus ejection malfunction creates a scenario where conventional wisdom gets pilots killed. My mother died proving there's an unconventional approach that works, but it requires accepting temporary instability and trusting secondary control pathways that standard doctrine says to avoid. Nobody wants to teach that because it sounds too dangerous. But you know what's actually dangerous? What's happening to Falcon 77 right now while everyone tries safe procedures that don't work? The radio crackled with the sound of the general conferring with someone nearby, voices too muffled to make out clearly. Maya waited, watching through the cockpit windscreen as the F-22 continued losing altitude in the distance, smoke still trailing, the pilot's time running out with every second of discussion and debate. Falcon 1, the general said finally, I'm going to patch you through to 77 directly. But understand, if your procedures make things worse, if that pilot dies because we trusted a teenager's advice over our expert's judgment, then I carry that for the rest of my life, Maya said quietly. Just like I carry knowing my mother died alone testing procedures that could have saved 77 if anyone had listened to her research. Put me through, sir. Please. There was a click, a burst of static, and then a different voice filled her headphones. This is Falcon 77. Who am I talking to? The pilot sounded exhausted and terrified in equal measure, trying to maintain professional calm while his aircraft disintegrated around him. Maya could hear the strain in every word, the knowledge that death was approaching fast and nothing he tried had stopped it. 77, this is Falcon 1, Maya said, and even saying it made her throat tight. This was the first time she'd used her inherited call sign operationally, the first time she was claiming her mother's legacy outside of private family ceremonies and personal study. I'm going to help you save your aircraft. But you need to trust me, and what I'm about to tell you is going to feel completely wrong according to your training. Falcon 1. The pilot's voice carried confusion and something else, maybe recognition of the legendary call sign, maybe desperation to accept help from any source. Cobra Base says you're I don't understand what's happening right now. You don't need to understand, Maya said firmly. You need to listen and do exactly what I tell you. Your hydraulics are cascading because the failure pattern is trying to preserve primary control systems that are already compromised. Standard procedure is to let the computer manage the cascade while you try to maintain attitude. That's killing you right now because the computer is making decisions based on normal failure parameters and this isn't normal. You need to override the computer and manually route hydraulic pressure through secondary systems that your training says are backup only. That's negative, Falcon 1, we don't route through secondary systems except as last resort, the instability risks are less than certain death, Maya interrupted. Listen to me, 7-7. I know this sounds insane. I know every instinct you have is screaming that I'm wrong. But my mother flew this exact scenario during test operations. She proved you can maintain control authority through secondary pathways if you accept temporary instability. You're going to feel like the aircraft is getting worse when you make these changes. It's going to feel like you're losing control. You're not. You're trading uncontrollable descent for controllable instability, and that trade keeps you alive. The pilot was breathing hard, audible over the radio. Maya could imagine him in the cockpit, strapped into an ejection seat that wouldn't eject, watching his instruments show failing systems, trying to decide if he should trust a stranger's voice telling him to violate every procedure he'd been trained to follow. Who are you? He asked finally. How do you know these procedures? I'm the daughter of the pilot who developed them, Maya said. I'm 13 years old. I'm sitting in the cockpit of a commercial flight right now because I recognized your failure pattern and I know how to save you. My mother was Falcon 1 before me. She died testing the procedures I'm about to give you. Her work was classified but never adopted because it seemed too dangerous. But she was right, and I've spent 3 years studying her research, and you're running out of time to decide whether you trust her legacy or not. Silence on the radio, broken only by the sound of the pilot's harsh breathing and warning tones from his cockpit instruments. Okay, he said finally. Okay, Falcon 1. Tell me what to do. Relief flooded through Maya so intensely she had to grip the back of the pilot's seat to stay steady. First thing, reach overhead and find your hydraulic system control panel. You should see indicators for primary, secondary, and tertiary routing systems. Roger, I see them. Right now your primary system is showing red, degraded, about 12% capacity according to what I heard earlier. Your secondary system is showing amber, standby mode, not engaged. Correct? Affirm. You need to manually shut down the primary system completely and force engagement of secondary before the cascade reaches critical failure point. The computer won't do this automatically because it's trying to preserve any primary system function. But that primary system is dying anyway, and keeping it partially online is preventing clean transfer to secondary pathways. If I shut down primary and secondary doesn't engage cleanly, you lose everything and you die, Maya finished bluntly. But you're losing everything anyway. The cascade is going to take primary to 0 in the next 60 seconds regardless of what you do. At least this way you're controlling the transition instead of letting it happen chaotically. Another pause. The F-22 outside the commercial flight's window dropped another 100 feet, the descent barely arrested. Time was running out. Shutting down primary hydraulics now, the pilot said. Maya's heart hammered as she watched the distant fighter lurch violently, the nose pitching down as primary control systems went offline. For 3 seconds the F-22 looked like it was entering an uncontrolled dive, and Maya heard the pilot grunt with effort as he fought the control stick. Secondary hydraulics, his voice was strained, engaging now, wait, I'm getting control response, it's not smooth but I'm getting. That's normal, Maya said quickly. The instability you're feeling is the secondary systems routing pressure through pathways that aren't designed for primary flight control. It's going to feel sluggish and imprecise. You need to adjust your control inputs, smaller movements, gentler corrections. You're not flying the jet the way you're used to. You're flying it like a cargo plane, using gross control movements instead of fighter precision. Roger, the pilot gasped. The F-22 had arrested its dive and was slowly, shakily leveling off, but the flight path was erratic, the wings rocking with instability that made several passengers on the commercial flight gasp in fear. Next step, Maya continued, forcing her voice to stay calm and authoritative even though her hands were shaking. Your engine situation. You've got fire or damage in the port engine, correct? Affirm, port engine is dying, I've already initiated shutdown sequence. Cancel that, Maya said. You need to keep that engine running as long as possible even if it's damaged. Negative, Falcon 1, standard procedure for engine fire is immediate shutdown to prevent catastrophic failure. Standard procedure assumes you have good flight controls, Maya countered. You don't. You're running on secondary hydraulics, which means you've got reduced control authority. You need every bit of thrust you can get to maintain controllability, even if that engine is damaged. Shutting it down completely reduces your thrust margin to the point where you can't maintain altitude with your degraded controls. Throttle it back to minimum sustainable power, but keep it lit. That engine could explode. Or you could stall out and crash because you don't have enough power to maintain flight with your control issues, Maya said flatly. My mother tested this. She proved you can keep a damaged engine running long enough to reach emergency landing if the alternative is loss of controllability. Trust me. The pilot made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I'm trusting a kid I've never met to keep me alive with procedures that sound like suicide. This is the strangest day of my career. Cancel the port engine shutdown, Maya repeated. Throttle back to 30% power. That'll minimize damage progression while maintaining thrust margin. Canceling shutdown, throttle to 30%, okay, I've still got thrust, engine temperature is rising but holding in yellow range. Good. Now here's where it gets difficult. Maya pulled up her tablet with her free hand, opening one of her mother's most detailed technical documents. You need to manually reconfigure your flight control computer to accept the secondary hydraulic routing as primary operational mode. If you don't do this, the computer is going to keep trying to restore primary systems and you'll get conflicting control inputs that'll tear the aircraft apart. How do the pilot stopped. Wait, flight control reconfiguration requires access codes I don't have in the cockpit. That's maintenance-level programming. Maya read off a 12-digit code from her tablet. Try this access sequence. My mother documented override codes for emergency field reconfiguration. The Air Force never changed them after her death because nobody thought they'd ever be needed. She heard typing sounds over the radio, fast and desperate. That worked. I'm in the configuration menu. What settings do I change? For the next 2 minutes, Maya walked the pilot through a series of technical adjustments that sounded like gibberish to everyone in the commercial cockpit watching her. Captain Rodriguez and his co-pilot exchanged glances but stayed silent, recognizing expertise far beyond their commercial aviation experience. Maya's voice never wavered as she guided the F-22 pilot through computer system reconfigurations that most Air Force ground crews would need technical manuals to attempt. Okay, the pilot said finally, flight computer is reconfigured, I'm showing secondary hydraulics as primary operational mode now, and, yeah, the control response feels better, more predictable. Still not normal but definitely more stable than before. That's as good as it gets with this failure pattern, Maya told him. You're not going to have fighter-level maneuverability, but you've got enough control authority to reach a controlled landing if we can find you a suitable runway. Cobra Base is vectoring me toward Peterson Air Force Base, about 40 miles northeast of my current position. Can you make 40 miles with your current engine status and fuel load? Fuel's not an issue, I've got plenty. Engine status is concerning but holding stable. If nothing else fails, he stopped, and Maya heard the dark humor in his voice. Well, if nothing else fails, which feels unlikely at this point. You're going to make it, Maya said with more confidence than she felt. Just maintain current heading and altitude. Don't try any aggressive maneuvers. Treat the aircraft like it's made of glass and you're trying not to break it. Gentle corrections only. Roger that, Falcon 1. The pilot paused. Thank you. I don't know how you learned all this or why you're on a commercial flight giving tactical advice, but you just saved my life. You're not saved until you're on the ground, Maya said, but she felt something loosen in her chest. He was going to make it. The procedures were working. Her mother had been right. The next 15 minutes felt like hours. Maya stayed on the radio frequency, monitoring the F-22 pilot's progress as he limped toward Peterson Air Force Base with his crippled fighter. The secondary hydraulics held, the damaged engine continued running despite temperatures that made everyone nervous, and the flight control reconfigurations kept the aircraft stable enough to maintain controlled flight. It wasn't pretty, the Raptor flew like a wounded bird, requiring constant corrections and gentle inputs, but it flew. The commercial flight passengers had gone silent, watching through windows as the drama unfolded. Word had spread through the cabin about the teenager in the cockpit, the girl calling herself Falcon 1 who was somehow talking down a dying fighter jet using knowledge nobody could quite understand. People recorded on phones, took pictures, whispered theories about who this kid really was. Maya heard none of it. Her entire focus was on the voice in her headphones, on the pilot who trusted her with his life, on making sure her mother's research continued working the way Sarah Chen had promised it would. Falcon 1, I have Peterson in sight, the pilot reported, and Maya could hear the relief in his voice. 11 miles out, towers clearing emergency approach, crash crew standing by. You're going to need a long rollout, Maya reminded him. Your braking authority is compromised with secondary hydraulics. Tell tower you'll need full runway length and emergency arresting cables deployed. Already requested. They're ready for me. Maya watched through the commercial cockpit windscreen as the F-22 began its descent in the distance, dropping toward the Air Force Base runway that was barely visible on the horizon. The fighter's approach was rough, altitude control inconsistent, wings wobbling with instability, but the pilot maintained control, fighting the damaged aircraft every foot of the way down. 3 miles out, the pilot reported. Gear coming down, gear indicates 3 green lights, okay, I've got landing gear. Easy on the approach, Maya said. Don't try to grease the landing. Get it on the runway and keep it straight. Pretty doesn't matter. Pretty went out the window about 20 minutes ago, the pilot said, and Maya heard the tight humor of someone who knew they were seconds from either survival or catastrophe. 2 miles, 1 mile, over the threshold now. The pilot's voice was tight with concentration. Flare, touchdown. Even from miles away, Maya could see the puff of smoke as the F-22's wheels hit runway concrete. The fighter bounced slightly, landed again harder, and rolled out in a barely controlled straight line. The tail hook deployed and caught one of the emergency arresting cables, bringing the Raptor to a violent but successful stop with runway to spare. I'm down. The pilot's voice exploded over the radio with raw emotion. I'm stopped, I'm alive, oh my God I'm alive. The commercial cockpit erupted in cheers. Captain Rodriguez was grinning, his co-pilot pumping his fist, and through the cockpit door Maya could hear passengers applauding. She sagged against the pilot's seat, suddenly boneless with relief, her hands finally stopping their shaking now that the crisis had passed. Falcon 1, the pilot said, his voice thick with emotion, I don't know how to thank you. I should be dead right now. That aircraft should be scattered across Utah in 1,000 pieces. I don't understand what just happened, but you saved my life. My mother saved your life, Maya said quietly. I just remembered what she taught me. General Marcus came back on the frequency, his voice carrying a mixture of emotions Maya couldn't quite identify. Falcon 1, this is Cobra Base. We're going to need to debrief you extensively about those procedures. What you just did, that should not have been possible. Our experts are reviewing the entire sequence and nobody can quite believe what we just witnessed. It's all in my mother's research files, Maya said. The ones the Air Force classified but never adopted. Everything I told your pilot came from Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen's documentation. She spent years developing these procedures. She proved they work. Maybe now people will actually listen. We're listening now, the general said. Falcon 1. Maya, that was the most remarkable piece of tactical aviation guidance I've witnessed in 30 years of service. We're going to want you to come to Cobra Base when your flight lands. There are people who need to meet you. And we need to properly validate your mother's research that we should have validated years ago. Maya nodded even though he couldn't see her. Yes, sir. And Maya? Welcome to the Operational Air Force. You've earned that call sign today. I flew with your mother on 2 combat deployments. She'd be incredibly proud of you right now. Maya's vision blurred with tears she'd been holding back for the entire crisis. Thank you, sir. Rodriguez gently took the headset back, speaking briefly with Cobra Base to coordinate arrival procedures before signing off the military frequency. He turned to Maya with an expression of pure wonder. I've been flying for 23 years, he said slowly. Commercial, military cargo, I've seen a lot. But I have never seen anything like what you just did. How does a 13-year-old kid know emergency procedures for the most advanced fighter jet in the world? My mom taught me, Maya said simply. Not directly, she died before she could. But she left her research, her notes, her knowledge. I spent 3 years learning everything she knew because it was the only way I had left to be close to her. I never thought I'd actually need to use any of it. That pilot is alive because you did, Rodriguez said. That's what matters. Maya walked back through the cabin on shaky legs, acutely aware of every passenger staring at her. The whispers followed her down the aisle, that's her. She's just a kid. Did you hear what she did? Falcon 1. The businessman in 14E was staring at her like she'd sprouted wings. The granola bar lady had tears on her cheeks. Jennifer was waiting at Maya's row, and when Maya slid back into her seat, the flight attendant crouched down beside her. I need to apologize, Jennifer said quietly. I treated you like a child who needed looking after. I had no idea. You couldn't have known, Maya said, too exhausted for the conversation to feel awkward. I am a child. I'm 13. I do need looking after most of the time. Today just happened to be different. Your mother must have been an extraordinary person. She was. Maya pulled her tablet back out, looking at the technical documents that had just saved a life, at her mother's handwriting in the margins of complex diagrams. She really was. Flight 2847 continued to Seattle, but the atmosphere in the cabin had transformed completely. Passengers kept glancing at Maya, some with awe, some with confusion, all with recognition that they'd witnessed something remarkable. The young couple from the row ahead asked if they could take a picture with her. A businessman offered her his business card, saying his company worked with military contractors and would love to talk with her someday. An older veteran with an Air Force pin on his jacket came back to her row, stood at attention, and saluted her with tears in his eyes. Maya handled it all with awkward grace, still just a kid who didn't quite know what to do when adults treated her like someone important. She answered questions when people asked, but mostly she just wanted to put her headphones back on and disappear into her tablet, back to being nobody special. When Flight 2847 finally touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 5:47 p.m., over 2 hours behind schedule due to the midair emergency, the gate agent's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been informed that military personnel are waiting at the gate. All passengers please remain seated until our special passenger has deplaned. Maya gathered her backpack with shaking hands. This was real now. The Air Force was waiting for her. She'd used her mother's call sign operationally, saved a pilot's life, and validated research that had been dismissed for years. Nothing would be the same after she walked off this aircraft. The jetway door opened and Maya stepped through to find herself facing an honor guard of Air Force officers in dress uniforms. General Marcus was there, silver stars gleaming on his shoulders, flanked by colonels and majors who stood at attention. Behind them were news crews with cameras, base personnel who'd heard what happened, and in the distance, walking across the tarmac with the assistance of medical personnel, the pilot of Falcon 77. Maya froze in the jetway doorway, suddenly terrified in a way she hadn't been during the actual emergency. This was too much attention, too many important people, too much weight settling onto shoulders that still belonged to a kid who just wanted to honor her mother's memory. General Marcus stepped forward and saluted her crisply. Falcon 1. On behalf of the United States Air Force, thank you for your service today. You saved the life of Captain James Morrison and preserved a critical military asset through knowledge and tactical expertise that exceeded anything our most experienced personnel could provide. Your mother would be honored by what you accomplished today. Maya returned the salute awkwardly, not quite sure of the protocol but doing her best. Thank you, sir. I just did what my mom would have done. No, the general said gently. You did what your mother spent her career preparing for but never got to see validated. You proved her research was correct. You honored her legacy in the most meaningful way possible. That's far more than just anything. Captain Morrison reached the group, still in his flight suit, moving stiffly like someone who just survived the most stressful experience of his life. He was younger than Maya expected, maybe late 20s, with the kind of face that probably usually smiled easily but which currently showed the strain of recent trauma mixed with overwhelming gratitude. He stopped in front of Maya and slowly, formally, came to attention and saluted. Falcon 1. I owe you my life. I don't have words adequate for what you did today. Maya felt her eyes burning with tears again. You trusted me when you had no reason to. That took more courage than anything I did. You gave me a reason to trust you, Morrison said. You knew exactly what you were talking about. Every procedure you gave me worked perfectly. Your mother's research was brilliant, and you mastered it completely. That's not luck, that's skill and dedication and honoring a legacy in the most powerful way imaginable. One of the colonels stepped forward with a tablet. Ms. Chen, Maya, we've been reviewing your mother's research files in detail over the past 2 hours. The procedures you walked Captain Morrison through were documented exactly as you described them, but they were never field-tested or validated because of concerns about the risk involved. Your mother's final test flight was attempting to prove these procedures under controlled conditions when her aircraft experienced actual catastrophic failures. She died proving the procedures work, but because her data was lost with the aircraft, we couldn't validate her findings. Until today. Today you provided us with perfect real-world validation, another officer added. Everything your mother theorized proved correct under actual emergency conditions. We're fast-tracking her research for official adoption into F-22 emergency procedures. Every Raptor pilot in the Air Force is going to learn what you taught Captain Morrison today. Your mother's work will be taught at every level of fighter aviation training from this point forward. Maya's throat was too tight to speak. Her mother had been right. Sarah Chen had spent her career pushing boundaries, developing procedures that other people thought were too risky, and she died proving her innovations worked. The Air Force had filed her research away, too uncertain to validate it, too cautious to teach it. Until her daughter had used that same research to save a life, proving beyond any doubt that Sarah Chen's legacy deserved to be recognized and continued. There's more, General Marcus said quietly. Captain Morrison has requested that you accompany him to Cobra Base for a formal recognition ceremony. Given the circumstances and your age, we'll need your guardian's permission, but we'd like to properly honor both you and your mother's contributions to Air Force aviation. This was an extraordinary event, and it deserves extraordinary recognition. My aunt, Maya said. She lives here in Seattle. She's my legal guardian since my mom died. We've already contacted her, the general confirmed. She's quite eager to see you, as you might imagine. She's also given preliminary permission for the recognition ceremony, though we'll handle all the formal arrangements to ensure you're properly supported. You're still a minor, and we're very aware of our responsibility to treat you appropriately. Maya nodded, still processing everything happening around her. Just 6 hours ago she'd been an anonymous kid boarding a flight, someone passengers offered snacks to and flight attendants checked on with kind concern. Now she was standing on an airport jetway surrounded by Air Force officers, news cameras recording her, being called by her mother's legendary call sign and thanked for saving a pilot's life. "Can I ask something?" Maya said quietly. "Anything," General Marcus replied. "My mom's research, when you teach it to other pilots, can you make sure they know it came from her?" Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, Falcon 1. She spent years developing these procedures. She died testing them. I want people to know it was her work. Not mine. I just remembered what she taught me. The general's expression softened. Every pilot who learns these procedures will know they came from Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen. Her name will be attached to every document, every training module, every briefing. And they'll know that her daughter carried forward that legacy when it mattered most. Both of you will be remembered, Maya. I promise you that. Captain Morrison cleared his throat. Falcon 1, Maya, there's something else. The F-22 pilot community is pretty close. We all know about your mother, about the original Falcon 1. She was legendary among Raptor pilots even before today. And now, you're going to be equally legendary. What you did today is going to be talked about in fighter squadrons for decades. You saved my life using knowledge your mother died developing. That's going to be part of Air Force history forever. Maya looked at him, this pilot who trusted a 13-year-old's voice when every instinct probably told him it was insane. Thank you for believing me. I know how crazy it must have sounded. Desperate people accept help from unexpected places, Morrison said with a slight smile. And the moment you started talking, I could hear the expertise in your voice. You knew exactly what you were talking about. That knowledge didn't come from a kid playing video games, it came from serious study of serious material. Your mother trained you well, even if she did it through documents rather than direct instruction. The airport terminal behind the military personnel was filling with curious travelers, people pulling out phones to record the scene, reporters trying to push forward for interviews. General Marcus noticed and gestured to his staff. Let's get you somewhere less public. We've arranged a private area where you can reunite with your aunt and we can handle media inquiries appropriately. You're a minor who just went through a significant trauma, even if you handled it brilliantly. We need to protect you as much as honor you. Maya followed the honor guard through the terminal, flanked by Air Force officers who cleared a path through the growing crowd. People were shouting questions, asking for her story, calling her a hero. She kept her eyes forward, clutching her backpack, trying to remember that she was still just Maya Chen from Denver, still 13 years old, still a kid who had homework due next week and a permission slip that needed signing. But she was also Falcon 1 now. Not just in name, not just as inherited legacy from a parent she'd lost, but operationally. She'd used the call sign under actual emergency conditions. She'd provided tactical guidance that saved a life. She'd honored her mother's memory in the most meaningful way possible, by proving Sarah Chen's work was correct and valuable and worth remembering. In a private airport lounge, Maya's Aunt Rebecca was waiting, and the moment Maya walked through the door she was swept into a crushing hug. Rebecca was crying, holding Maya tight enough to hurt, whispering, oh my God, I saw the news, I can't believe, you're okay, over and over. I'm fine, Aunt Becca, Maya said, her own tears finally breaking free. I'm okay. I did what Mom taught me. That's all. I just remembered what she knew. Rebecca pulled back, holding Maya's face in both hands, studying her with eyes that were Sarah's eyes, the same dark brown that Maya saw in the mirror every morning. Your mother would be so proud of you. So incredibly proud. You honored her legacy in a way I don't think any of us imagined when we gave you that call sign. We thought maybe someday when you were older, when you'd had time to train, but you were ready today. You were ready when it mattered. I spent 3 years getting ready, Maya said. I studied her files every day. I memorized procedures I never thought I'd use. I just wanted to understand what she knew, to feel close to her somehow. I didn't think. You saved someone's life, Rebecca interrupted gently. You took everything your mother taught you, everything she spent her career developing, and you used it to keep a pilot from dying. That's what heroes do, Maya. They step up when nobody expects them to, when the odds seem impossible, and they do what needs to be done. General Marcus gave them a few minutes of privacy before clearing his throat politely. Ms. Chen, Maya, we do need to discuss next steps. The media attention is going to be substantial. This story is already breaking nationally. 13-year-old girl saves military fighter pilot using deceased parents' research. It's compelling, it's dramatic, and it's going to be everywhere within hours. We need to make sure Maya is protected and supported through that attention. What do you recommend? Rebecca asked, slipping immediately into guardian mode. We can provide media training, help craft appropriate statements, handle interview requests through official channels, the general explained. Maya is a minor, which gives us certain legal protections we can invoke. We can also coordinate with your family to determine how much public exposure you're comfortable with. Some families embrace the publicity, others prefer privacy. Either choice is valid and will support whatever you decide. Maya looked at her aunt, then at the general. My mom didn't do her research for publicity. She did it to save pilots' lives. If talking about it helps make sure her procedures get taught, if it helps other pilots learn what Captain Morrison learned today, then I'll do interviews. But I don't want to be famous. I just want people to remember my mom and know her work was important. That's exactly the right attitude, General Marcus said approvingly. We'll handle the media carefully, make sure the focus stays on your mother's contributions and the importance of the research. You'll be part of the story, obviously, but we'll frame it as legacy and honor rather than making you into some kind of celebrity. Over the next hour, they handled logistics, transportation to Cobra Base for the recognition ceremony scheduled for the following week, media statement preparation, security arrangements given the public attention Maya would receive, and discussion of how to return her to normal life despite everything that had changed. Through it all, Maya felt herself being pulled in two directions. The kid who wanted to go home and hide in her room and process everything that had happened, and the inheritor of Falcon, one who recognized that responsibilities came with the call sign, that her mother's legacy deserved proper recognition even if that meant accepting uncomfortable attention. Captain Morrison stayed for the entire meeting, insisting that he wanted to be part of Maya's support system through whatever came next. You saved my life, he said simply when the general asked if he needed to return to medical evaluation. I'm not leaving until I'm sure she's taken care of. As evening fell over Seattle and the airport slowly emptied of regular travelers, Maya sat in the quiet lounge with her aunt, the Air Force officers having stepped out to coordinate final arrangements. Through the window she could see planes taking off and landing, routine operations continuing despite the extraordinary events of the day. Do you think Mom knows? Maya asked quietly. Wherever she is, do you think she knows what happened today? Rebecca put an arm around her shoulders. I think if there's any way for her to know, she does. And I think she's incredibly proud. Not just because you saved Captain Morrison, but because you honored her work, trusted her research when nobody else would, and proved she was right all along. That's what mattered to your mother, being right about the flying, about the procedures, about pushing boundaries to save lives. You validated everything she believed in. Maya leaned against her aunt's shoulder, exhausted beyond words. I miss her so much. I know, honey. I know. Using her call sign today felt like she was there with me. Like she was guiding me through it, telling me what to say. Does that sound crazy? Not even a little bit, Rebecca assured her. You spent 3 years absorbing her knowledge, studying her words, learning how she thought. Of course it felt like she was there, in a very real way, she was. She taught you everything you needed to know, even though she couldn't teach you directly. That's an extraordinary gift she left you. Through the window, Maya noticed something that made her breath catch. For F-22 Raptors were flying in formation over the airport, their distinctive silhouettes unmistakable against the darkening sky. As she watched, they executed a missing man formation, for aircraft flying in tight group, then one suddenly pulling up and away, leaving a gap in the formation that represented fallen warriors. "That's for your mother," General Marcus said quietly, having returned to the lounge. "And for you." The F-22 community wanted to honor both Falcon ones, the one who developed the procedures and the one who proved they work. That missing man formation is their way of saying thank you to Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen for her sacrifice, and welcome to you for carrying forward her legacy. Maya watched the fighters until they disappeared into the distance, the missing position in their formation a powerful reminder of absence and loss, and legacy continued. Her mother was gone, had been gone for 3 years, would be gone for the rest of Maya's life. But her knowledge remained, her research continued saving lives, and her call sign lived on through a daughter who'd proven today that love expressed through intensive study could honor the dead while protecting the living. "Falcon 1, Maya whispered to the empty sky where the fighters had flown. Not claiming the call sign, not announcing herself, just acknowledging the weight and privilege of bearing a name that represented excellence and sacrifice and the responsibility of carrying forward what extraordinary people left behind. The Air Force officers began coordinating departure, preparing to transport Maya and her aunt to their home with security escorts given the media attention likely waiting there. Captain Morrison came over one last time, crouching down to Maya's eye level the way adults do when they want to make sure kids hear them clearly. "I'm going to see you next week at the ceremony," he said. "But I wanted to say something now, before all the official stuff. What you did today took courage I can barely comprehend. You were brave enough to speak up when everyone around you thought you were just a kid. You were confident enough to trust your knowledge against the judgment of military experts. And you were skilled enough to guide me through procedures that saved my life. Those 3 things, courage, confidence, and skill, are what make great pilots. You already have all 3, at 13 years old. Whatever you decide to do with your life, whatever path you take, you're going to be extraordinary at it. Just like your mother was." "Thank you," Maya managed, her voice tight. "I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad the procedures worked." "Your mother's procedures worked," Morrison corrected gently. "She figured this out years ago. She just needed someone brave enough to trust her research when it mattered. You were that person. Don't forget that." The drive to Rebecca's house was surreal, military escort vehicles, Air Force officers in her aunt's minivan, neighbors standing in yards staring as the convoy pulled up to a modest suburban home that Maya had visited dozens of times but which suddenly felt like it belonged to a different life. News vans were already parked down the street, cameras recording their arrival, reporters shouting questions that the Air Force personnel politely but firmly declined to answer. Inside the familiar house, surrounded by photos of her mother in uniform and her own school pictures that documented a normal childhood alongside an extraordinary legacy, Maya finally let herself collapse. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the emergency, through the airport arrival, through the meetings and planning and attention, finally drained away and left her hollow and exhausted. Rebecca ordered pizza because neither of them had energy for cooking. They ate in the living room, not talking much, processing the day through silence and shared presence. Maya's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends who'd seen the news, from her school calling to check if she was okay, from reporters who'd somehow gotten her number and were requesting interviews. "You don't have to answer any of that tonight," Rebecca said, gently taking the phone and setting it aside. "Tonight you're just Maya. Just my niece who had the most insane day imaginable and needs to rest. The world can wait." But Maya found she couldn't rest, her mind replaying the entire event over and over. The moment she'd seen the smoking F-22. The decision to speak up despite knowing how crazy she'd sound. The shock in Captain Morrison's voice when she'd identified herself as Falcon 1. The procedures flowing from her memory as if her mother was standing beside her, guiding her through each step. The relief of hearing, "I'm down, I'm alive. Do you think I did the right thing?" Maya asked suddenly. Speaking up, using Mom's call sign, all of it. Rebecca looked at her with surprise. Maya, you saved someone's life. How could that possibly not be the right thing? But what if I'd been wrong? What if the procedures hadn't worked? What if I'd made things worse and Captain Morrison died because the Air Force listened to a kid instead of their experts? But you weren't wrong, Rebecca said firmly. Your mother's research was correct. You trusted her knowledge, and it saved a life. Yes, there was risk involved, but the alternative was certain death for that pilot. You gave him a chance when he had none. That's always the right choice. The Air Force dismissed Mom's research because it seemed too dangerous, Maya continued, working through thoughts that had been building all evening. They thought she was taking unnecessary risks, pushing too far beyond standard procedures. And then she died testing those procedures, which probably made them even more convinced they were right to dismiss her work. But today proved she was right all along. If they'd validated her research years ago, officially adopted her procedures, how many pilots could have been saved in situations like Captain Morrison's? How many people died because the Air Force was too cautious to trust what Mom discovered? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. That's a heavy question, honey. And not one with a comfortable answer. Your mother was a pioneer, she pushed boundaries that made people uncomfortable. Sometimes pioneers pay the price for being ahead of their time. But because of what you did today, her work won't be dismissed anymore. Every pilot who learns her procedures from now on will have a better chance of surviving impossible situations. That's her legacy now. That's what you helped create. Maya nodded slowly, accepting the weight of it. Her mother had died proving procedures that could save lives. Maya had honored that sacrifice by using those same procedures when they mattered. And now the Air Force would teach what Sarah Chen had discovered, ensuring that her death contributed to saving future lives rather than just being tragic loss. I'm going to have to be different now, Maya said quietly. After today, I can't just be regular Maya anymore. People know about Falcon 1 now. They know I have this knowledge. The Air Force is going to want me involved in validating Mom's other research, maybe even developing new procedures based on her work. I'll have responsibilities that normal 13-year-olds don't have. Are you okay with that? Rebecca asked gently. Maya thought about it, really considered the question. Was she okay with her childhood effectively ending, with accepting responsibilities beyond her years, with being known as the kid who saved the F-22 pilot for the rest of her life? I think I have to be, she said finally. Because this is what I chose when I decided to inherit Mom's call sign. It wasn't just a name or a tribute, it was accepting responsibility for carrying forward what she started. Today proved that responsibility is real, not ceremonial. I can't go back to being just a kid now. That chance ended the moment I said, "This is Falcon 1" over the radio. You're still allowed to be a kid, Rebecca insisted. You're 13 years old. You still need to do homework and hang out with friends and worry about normal teenager things. What happened today doesn't erase your right to have a normal life. But it changes it, Maya said. Forever. I'm okay with that, Aunt Becca. Really? Mom spent her career working to save pilots' lives. If I can continue that work, if I can help validate her research and make sure other pilots benefit from what she discovered, then that's how I want to honor her memory. Not by trying to be normal, but by being worthy of the call sign she left me. Rebecca pulled her into another hug, and Maya felt her aunt's tears against her hair. Your mother would be so proud of you. And I'm proud of you too. Not just for what you did today, but for the person you're choosing to be. That takes courage too, accepting responsibility instead of running from it. They sat together on the couch as night deepened outside, the news vans eventually leaving, the neighborhood growing quiet again. Maya's phone continued buzzing with messages, but she ignored it, content to just sit with her aunt and process the extraordinary events of a Friday afternoon that had changed everything. Somewhere in the night, pilots were flying missions, relying on procedures and training that kept them safe. Tomorrow, those same pilots would learn about new emergency procedures developed by Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen and validated by her 13-year-old daughter. They'd study the techniques that had saved Captain Morrison's life. They'd practice maneuvers that Sarah had pioneered and Maya had proven effective. And they'd know the call sign Falcon 1 represented not just one extraordinary pilot, but a legacy carried forward through love and loss and the determination to honor those who came before by continuing their work. Maya finally fell asleep on the couch, exhausted beyond measure, her tablet beside her still showing her mother's technical documents. In her dreams, she was flying, not in a cockpit, but alongside her mother, watching Sarah Chen pilot an F-22 through impossible maneuvers with skill and confidence that defied conventional wisdom. "You did good today, baby girl," dreamed Sarah said, her voice clear and warm and proud. "You trusted what I taught you. You saved a life." That's what being Falcon 1 means, being willing to do what seems impossible to protect the people who matter. "I miss you, Mom," Dream Maya replied. "I know. But I'm still with you. In everything you learn from my research, in every procedure you memorized, in every moment you choose courage over fear." That's how love continues after death, through knowledge passed forward, through legacies honored, through children who grow up to be the kind of warriors their parents would be proud of. Maya woke on Saturday morning to sunlight and the smell of coffee and her aunt moving quietly in the kitchen trying not to wake her. For a moment, she was just a kid who'd fallen asleep on the couch during a movie. Then memory returned, the F-22, Captain Morrison, the emergency procedures, the honor guard at the airport, and she realized that yesterday had been real, not some strange dream. Her phone showed 247 unread messages. The local news was running her story as breaking headlines. And somewhere at Cobra Base, Air Force personnel were beginning the process of officially adopting Sarah Chen's research into standard F-22 training protocols. Maya Chen, 13 years old, called Falcon 1, saved a pilot's life yesterday and changed Air Force aviation forever. And she'd done it not by being extraordinary herself, but by trusting that her mother's extraordinary work deserved recognition, that love expressed through intensive study could honor the dead. And that sometimes the most legendary call signs pass to the next generation not through ceremony but through desperate moments when inherited capabilities prove that grief and determination can keep saving lives long after those who developed the knowledge are gone. Her mother would be proud. Maya was sure of that now.